As a student, I produced a short documentary about Vandenberg Air Force Base. At the time, I was focused on the war in Iraq and didn't understand the depth of the issues I was exploring. A year later, I decided to revisit the subject. This is what I found.
Usually people think of Star Wars as referring to missile defense in isolation, but the weapons with a lot longer history are sometimes thought of as enabling vehicles, sometimes even very stabilizing ones, like military communications in space, military intelligence in space, military targeting. I'm Loring Wirbel. I'm with Citizens for Peace in Space in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Recently got done writing a book called Star Wars, U.S. Tools of Space Supremacy. And we have been doing a lot of work on some of the Space Command bases in Colorado Springs and Denver.
Any number of weapons have been first invented as defensive weapons, thought of as defensive weapons. The same sort of thing will happen with weapons in space. They might be put there for defensive purposes, but quickly mankind would learn that they could be used for offensive purposes as well. My name is Phillip Coyle. I'm a senior advisor with the Center for Defense Information, a think tank in Washington, D.C. From 1994 to 2001, I served as an Assistant Secretary of Defense for testing and evaluation in the Pentagon.
As one admiral said to me from the Pentagon, he said, "Helen, our mission in the Pentagon is to destroy property and to kill people. That is obscene. And if we go on killing and destroying property, we're going to blow up the world because inevitably we will use nuclear weapons, and that'll be it." I'm Helen Caldicott. I'm a paediatrician. I led the movement in Australia against the French nuclear tests in 1971-72, against uranium mining in 1975, founded Physicians for Social Responsibility in 1978.
The longest running agencies involved in military space are not those that are usually considered. We have a Defense Department agency called DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, which has been a leader in very advanced R&D for a lot of space weapons. The National Security Agency is the nation's leading electronic listening agency. It's been around since 1952 and has moved most of its listening posts into space. Similarly, the National Reconnaissance Office is the nation's largest intelligence agency. It's responsible for spy satellites. It's been in existence since 1960, but most people know very little about what it does. It used to be that arms control traditionalists would say, we should always support what the NRO and the NSA do, and we should not talk about them because they are the national technical means of verification that let us have arms control treaties. So we should treat them as our quiet friend. And that was legitimate for a while because in the 50s and 60s, the NRO and the NSA helped disprove bomber gaps and missile gaps. And so they served as kind of like the last resort information source that told you, no, Russia really didn't have 10 times the amount of missiles we did. But when TENCAP got started, NSA and NRO said very publicly, we're not in the business of helping arms control treaties anymore. We're in the business of serving the warfighter. They said that 10 years before George Bush came into power, and nobody from the traditional arms control community was listening at all. And it's important to remember that Space Command, with Clinton's blessing, started publishing documents like Vision for 2020 in '96 that said it's our purpose to dominate the planet. And so It's perfectly obvious where George Bush's strategies of planetary dominance come from.
In preparation for making this film, I read Vision for 2020. My first reaction was shock. I couldn't believe, or didn't want to believe, what I was reading. The ability to dominate space, protection of commerce, space-based strike weapons. But one notion stood out: the idea of full spectrum dominance.
Full spectrum dominance means being able to beat an enemy decisively, not 51-49, but decisively in all areas. For example, the Bush administration sees a threat in space and wants to deploy weapons in space to deal with that threat. It's not clear to me where that threat would be coming from unless it's Martians who are upset with our rovers crawling around their landscape.
What the Pentagon actually means is the full spectrum of military battle, that space should be an integrated part of planetary warfare where you consider all elements of air, sea, land, space to be one unified whole, because they don't want to make the distinctions anymore. It's all one network used for planetary dominance.
We don't see a threat from space. One of the things that goes with this idea of full spectrum dominance is doing things even though there isn't a threat to justify it. Doing things just because you could, but not because you need to spend the money, that there aren't better things to spend the money on, or that there's a justifying threat.
Unfortunately, there is an assumption among many peace activists that you can show people this language and they'll say, oh wow, this is terrible, I can't believe my government is saying this. If it was really that bad, Space Command probably would have classified it. But they didn't bother to because they knew they could say it openly. Because you talk to far too many people and they say, if it's a choice between giving up some of my things for a more just and equitable world or keeping all my toys by having bigger and bigger guns to protect my toys, I'll keep my toys, thank you very much. I hate to come to that conclusion, but I have seen it in the aftermath of the invasion of Iraq, and I continue to see it every day. And it's frightening to think that Space Command may have found a very popular slogan with its unjust economics viewpoint.
I too have seen this, and it frightens me that this mentality is now extending into space.
Some people wish that space were not militarized, but space is militarized. We have reconnaissance satellites, weather satellites for the military, communications satellites, many of which were put up for commercial purposes, but many of which were put up for military purposes. But although space is militarized, it's not yet weaponized. There are as yet no attack weapons in space, that is, strike weapons, shooters in space, capable of shooting down other things in space. And it would be good to draw the line at putting attack weapons in space before a new arms race in space begins.
It's probably unrealistic to say we'll ever completely end the militarization of space because there are a lot of military space networks out there. However, we can fight for the multilateral control of military networks in space. And I think that the only way we can bring the weaponization of space back to a multilateral domain is by enforcing the idea that space intelligence itself should be used in a multilateral way, and that agencies responsible for this cannot go around saying that their purpose in life is to serve the warfighter. That is aggressive, in-your-face talk, and it has no business being part of a multilateral space regime.
I didn't live through the Cold War, and honestly, I never expected that anyone would want to create another one. As someone from the next generation of adults who will have to deal with the consequences, I have a hard time accepting the path we're headed down.
All citizens need to be concerned about this. This is a process of global public health. If there's a nuclear war, it will be the final epidemic of not just the human race, but 30 million other species that cohabit the planet with us. So what can people do? First, they need to be educated. And as Jefferson said, an informed democracy will behave in a responsible fashion. So they need to inform themselves.
Your constant learning process never ends to the day you die. And learning about the way the U.S. government conducts itself in the world, militarily, economically, is our responsibility. And you'll find as time goes along that, sure, it may be complex, but it's not nearly as complex as those in control of it would like you to believe.
We're talking about turning our planet into a lump of rock like Mars. Would people be concerned about that? I would think so. Our responsibility is to make sure the creation continues.
And many take that responsibility seriously.
It is not disarmament to tell another country that is weaker than us, you cannot have any weapons of mass destruction, while we have more than anyone else in the entire world put together.
For military planners, a new national missile defense system marks a critical step in ensuring global domination in the future. Scheduled for deployment in September of 2004, this system would significantly increase America's first strike capabilities. It could also create a new arms race.
The first way in which weapons with attack capability could probably be put into space would be for missile defense. The Bush administration has said that it wants to be able to shoot down enemy missiles from land, from sea, from aircraft, and from space. This not only could set off a new arms race in space, but it could be very expensive.
The Bush administration was sworn in January 2001, the day after a special commission chaired by Donald Rumsfeld on space national security policy issued its report, where Rumsfeld talked about a space Pearl Harbor, where we would be blindsided by space adversaries if we didn't have space weaponization. And indeed, we're talking now about space negation, where you negate the very use of space to your allies, to your adversaries, to everyone, unless it comes up to your definition of what is good use of space.
There is concern from our allies, Canada and Australia, about putting weapons in space. There's been concern from Russia and from China and other countries. Russia was not concerned about the United States testing missile defense systems. Russia was concerned about the United States deploying missile defense systems, which of course is exactly what we're doing now in Alaska and in California.
Even if one were to assume that what Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney wanted for the world was right for the world, they are going at it at a completely wrong way for their own interests, because they are only using the stick, they are only playing the bad cop, and all that tends to do is to make the world angrier and angrier with you. And I think that's what's going to happen as Star Wars weapons are deployed.
America has no right to militarize or weaponize space. Space is a global commons belonging to all the people of the planet. 5% of the Earth's population have no right to militarize space and fight war from space, which they're actually currently doing in Iraq. It's all orchestrated from space, and to put orbiting nuclear reactors and orbiting hydrogen bombs up in space. I mean, how dare the people in charge of this country, by default, decide to take over space and fight war within space and from space down to Earth, and quotes affect very many kills. This is madness.
I'm hoping that a lot of people understand that first strike invasion can never serve our nation's interests. And the whole purpose behind this space, I say space domination, but it's really planetary domination using space, will only make the problems of Iraq go global. And I think that what we are seeing now in the failure of our entire policies in Iraq would be seen 1,000-fold if any of these space domination strategies really come to the fore.
Full spectrum dominance, national missile defense, space domination strategies. It can all seem so complex. This is why education is critical. For our own well-being, we need to inform ourselves.
One of the failures of the critics of missile defense for the last few years has been a tactical focus on criticisms of either the final phase of missile defense when you try to shoot down an incoming rocket, or the boost phase of missile defense in its early launches. All of the groups that oppose either one or the other take as a given the argument that these are truly defensive weapons systems. Some people who say they're somewhat anti-Star Wars say, well, I could be in favor of boost phase weapons. There's only two kinds of boost phase weapons. Either space-based and airborne weapons, most laser weapons, directed energy, most of which violate the Outer Space Treaty, or close-in theater missile defense weapons. To make these work against either long-range or short-range missiles, you have to take your ships like the Aegis cruiser, right in to their area, be it the Straits of Taiwan or whatever. So you are talking about offensive weapon systems there. Mid-course is when you try to knock down the missile using a kinetic kill weapon or maybe a nuclear warhead. This is where a lot of the weapons get made obsolete by countermeasures, different kind of phony warheads coming in. And so, as a lot of critics say, they can be overwhelmed by countermeasures.
One of the things an enemy can do is deploy decoys and countermeasures that look just like the reentry vehicle, only they might be very lightweight, let's say a balloon. Just as we can make a balloon that looks like Mickey Mouse, you can make a balloon that looks like a reentry vehicle. And out in space, where a feather travels in the same way as a rock, you can't tell them apart. The way the tests are done right now, everything is planned out in advance. And in effect, when the enemy's target is launched, the defender knows exactly when it's launched, what the flight path is going to be, what the trajectory is going to be. They plan out in advance exactly where they're going to hit. If you were standing there watching with a stopwatch, you could time it out to the fraction of a second. What the target itself looks like, the warhead, the reentry vehicle, the other objects in the target cluster, all of that information is known in advance, and these are things that an enemy probably wouldn't tell you in advance, even though you might try to find them out. The Missile Defense Agency has basically said that as soon as they get one interceptor missile in a silo, that they could consider that an operational capability. That's terribly misleading because we don't know how to defend the United States with only one missile, and many other pieces of the system are missing anyway.
When I was young, all I wanted was the moon. I hung that National Geographic map in my room. In 7th grade, Mythology 101, they called me Little Endymion. You remember me now. And space was the object of all my country's desire. And the skies of my childhood were laced with launching pad fire.
I believe in space exploration. I believe it's important. But it doesn't come without consequences. It's also important for the people of the world to understand the potential impact of current programs on future generations.
There are a variety of real problems as to how missile defense changes warfare. Number one, it makes the whole hair trigger issue of nuclear war that much scarier. We've heard about all the problems of launch on warning and launch under false alerts, and if you add missile defense to the mix, you get at least one tier and sometimes several tiers of hair trigger systems that could go very, very wrong in terms of launching at the wrong time. Right now, it's unlikely that a space-based laser will ever be fielded, but they're talking about lasers based on the ground that would use mirrors in space. The lack of precision you would get compared to a space-based laser could mean that you would get misfirings of space-based mirrored lasers that could cause devastation in areas that did not mean to get that.
I have a hard time thinking of these systems as real. They seem futuristic and imaginary. But they are real, and the places where they exist are real. Vandenberg Air Force Base on the central coast of California is one of these places.
Vandenberg Air Force Base is playing two roles. First of all, it's been the place where the enemy, so-called enemy rockets, the surrogate targets, have been launched from towards Kwajalein Atoll in the Pacific, where the defensive interceptors have been launched. So one of the roles that Vandenberg has is to test the system as it is being developed. But it has another role, and that is it's one of two deployment sites for this National Missile Defense System. One of the deployment sites is at Fort Greely in Alaska. The other deployment site will be at Vandenberg in California.
In the past, Vandenberg also has been a key launch facility for all kinds of spy satellites and military communications satellites, but it's shared some duties with Cape Canaveral Patrick Air Force Base in Florida. Now, two factors are really changing and adding to Vandenberg's strategic value to the Defense Department. First of all, it will be a primary missile area for the ground-based mid-course interceptor missile. The second area where Vandenberg's playing a key role is in taking on added duties for spy satellite launches. There will be a few assorted national security launches from Florida, but everything is moving lock, stock, and barrel to Vandenberg. For the NRO, that means that new imaging satellites like Future Imagery Architecture, new signals intelligence satellites like Intruder, new communication satellites called the TSAT, and a very special polar satellite. Polar orbit satellites can only be launched from Vandenberg, called Advanced Polar System. Those will all be critical and necessary for the Pentagon's dominance plans, and they have to be launched from Vandenberg.
The obstacles can seem overwhelming, but many of us refuse to give up.
And so I still hold out hope that even if we have the ground-based missiles at Fort Greely and Vandenberg, even if the airborne laser starts flying, even if some kind of space-based mirror system gives us the equivalent of a space-based laser system, that might not be the end of the world. There might be a way to negotiate or take single-handed steps to get rid of those weapons. But it's going to take a lot of political guts.
Halfway gone, can't find the path you've fallen on. There's this
first experience at Vandenberg came in March of 2003. I went with Sanderson Beck to express concern over the role the base was playing in the Iraq War. Dennis Apple led a silent protest that day to express our horror over what was being done in our name. In May of 2004, I decided to return to Vandenberg, this time to express concern over the first deployment of missile defense interceptor missiles. What I found was a small group of concerned citizens.
Major Baca.
Yes.
What happens here at Vandenberg Base?
We do two things primarily. We launch commercial and military satellites, and then the second thing we do is we operate the Western Range, which extends from the coast of California out to the Kwajalein Atoll in the Marshall Islands.
Okay. And what are your thoughts about these people here protesting today?
Actually, I think it's great. Part of why I joined the military is service to my country, but the second reason is we also, when we come into the Air Force or in any branch of the military service, we take an oath to uphold the Constitution, and actually this supports what we do because it's exercising your First Amendment rights, which makes it special to be an American.
Not 30 minutes ago, Dennis Apple, a private citizen, was arrested just 30 feet from where we're standing here for exercising the exact First Amendment right that you just spoke of. Why was he arrested?
He was arrested specifically because last year he illegally trespassed, and he received a barment letter from the Vandenberg, the base. What happens, the conditions of that barment letter are that he's barred from the base for 3 years, except he can transit Highway 1, which is a public easement that runs obviously from Lompoc up through Santa Maria and beyond. He can transit that area, but he cannot stop unless it's an absolute emergency situation.
By arresting them, you're trashing your own rights.
You violated the Constitution.
Don't get over the line, Pete. You're trampling on what America stands.
He'll probably go to
You're hurting yourself. There are no veterans better than yours. So much for free speech.
You mentioned Dennis with abandoned bar has a right to transit Highway 1. MacGregor Eddy was also transiting Highway 1 and being dogged by, I believe, 4 MPs. Why was she being dogged?
I am really not sure what you mean by dog. What is that?
She was being pursued. There were 2 men on 4-wheelers. There were 2 men in a cruiser pursuing her as she was walking, which you just affirmed she had a right to do. Why was she being tailed by them?
Probably to make sure that she wasn't going to do any illegal actions.
Why do you reckon they're following you here? There's 2 4-wheelers and 2 cruisers.
I have no idea. There's been a helicopter hovering over us, and there's been a cop car following us that told us to stay on the pavement, which I can't hear because there's no shoulder. That would be dangerous. And I'm allowed to travel through the base.
Well, she's right here with me.
I've been through the base on train. They said that's fine. I've been to the base on bus. Bus actually pulls into the base at Vandenberg, and I've been through the base in car.
Okay, great.
And they say that's all fine, so this time I'm going to the base on foot.
Okay, what are they citing on the trespass?
MacGregor Eddy, are you on a terrorist mission?
Okay.
I'm walking with a peace flag past a base that's paid for with my tax money.
Okay, they're kind of following us.
And I'm here as a witness for peace, that our country would obey international law, not commit illegal wars against virtually defenseless countries. So I'm here for peace.
Why were you following her?
He's going to get arrested. Watch this. They're going to bust him. Oh,
Why were you following that woman? Why were you following her?
What were you asking them?
I was asking them why they were following this woman.
What did they say?
They said, turn off your recording device. Hold still. Thanks. They said, turn off your recording device. I'm wondering, why does it take 3 grown men to follow a woman in her 60s when when she's exercising her First Amendment right. They didn't come after me. Who knows what they'll do now? I am a veteran, and I swore an oath to defend the same Constitution these guys claim to be defending. MacGregor Eddy has a First Amendment right to be here. I don't know why they're hassling her at all. Not a happy day for freedom and democracy.
But wait, this song I want to dedicate to Nathan Bruckenthal. Do you want to know who Nathan Bruckenthal is?
Yes.
Nathan Bruckenthal is when on April 27th last year, my son is in the Persian Gulf with the Coast Guard, which I always liked to think was not military, and he wasn't really in danger, and he was in Kuwait, which is a friendly country, and all this stuff like that. So I like to think this is called denial. I'm supposed to know about these things as a nurse, but you're not, you kind of lose that stuff. So I was on the East Coast. I'd just come back from the Global Network in Maine, and I was in Philadelphia, and I'm having supper with my brother. My brother's an idiot. He tells me, oh, a coastie was killed boarding a boat. Now, there's less than 300 there, so it's not like the statistics are that bad. So I run to the internet to see if my son has been killed. So I'm typing it in to find out, and up comes the story. And so it's not my son, so I'm supposed to be happy? No, it's Nathan Bruckenthal. It's Nathan Bruckenthal, Native American from the state of Seattle, Washington. Nathan Bruckenthal, 24 years old, just married. Nathan Bruckenthal, whose wife is 8 months pregnant. So I'm supposed to be happy? You know, it's somebody else's son.
Yeah.
So there is no good in this. There is no good. This is a descent into hell. This is a descent into hell with atrocity and revenge and atrocity and revenge and atrocity and revenge. And the only thing we can do is stand up and stop it, and the rest of the world is waiting for us to do it. And they're depending on us inside this country to do it. So it's really up to us. And whatever we've been doing before, it's not enough. We can do more. Whatever sacrifices we've made, we can do more. So onward and upward, we must, yay. I'm actually supposed to rest. Yes.
Good idea. Yeah, MacGregor's gonna rest. Yeah, right. And I'm gonna wear ballerina suit. So I was hoping we could do this one for the counter demonstrators who were out there today, because you always want to, you know, speak to the other side directly. This is kind of their. We want a safer country, and it's in God we trust. So we'll bomb you during Ramadan, turn your world into dust. But pull up on your bootstraps, stand on your own 2 feet, as we blow them up with cluster bombs disguised as something to eat. We stand for freedom and prosperity, so we'll bomb your schools and hospitals. Make sure you live in liberty, and all you evildoers and your children and your wives, with our B-52s will show you how we value civilian lives. So hang a flag in your window, all hail to the chief. Follow the leader and suspend your disbelief. Our country, right or wrong, you know what to do. Say, God bless America, at red, white, and blue.
I had hoped to conclude with some newfound words of wisdom. However, my experiences only reinforced 2 of my most basic beliefs. First, that there is an alternative vision for 2020, shared by many people around the world. Second, that we must work with others to achieve this vision. No one can do this alone.
Wherever you may live, there is probably a space-related military base near you. And more than likely, there is also a peace group near you that has already been concerned about these military bases and is already working on something regarding this. This always doesn't mean a big consolidated Air Force base. For example, in Kansas, Boeing is manufacturing thousands of JDAM bombs, Joint Direct Attack Munition bombs. These are the smart bombs used in Iraq. They are space weapons. That makes the manufacturing plant for JDAM bombs a target for protest against space-based warfare. And that's what people need to understand, that this involves thousands of private companies, hundreds of U.S. bases, and there's probably one fairly near you.
If you knew the bombs were falling, if they showed them hit the ground, if you could see the bodies flying, if you could hear the sound, if you could see the rubble where the hospital once stood, if you saw the child's lifeless limbs, would you hold them if you could? If you knew that they were lying every time they spoke, for every laser-guided pinprick there were lives lost in the smoke, if instead of just the generals they had doctors too to describe the carnage of the cluster bombs, what if you knew? You knew that you were living in a huge conspiracy. Would you leave your suburbs, get out of your SUV? Would you hit the streets and fight for all our lives? Would you hold your ground when the stormtroopers arrive? If you knew that the whole planet depended on what you do now, would you take command with the speed our times allow? If the pundits told the truth for just a week or two and real life was shown on TV, what if you knew?